Las Ceann Comhairle, we're losing biodiversity around the globe at a rate unprecedented in human history. The number of plants, insects, mammals and birds that are threatened or endangered is growing every year. The land, ocean and atmosphere are being altered to an unparalleled degree. And a few weeks ago, the UN's Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services published its Global Assessment Report and advised that unless action is taken to reduce the intensity of drivers of biodiversity loss, there will be a further acceleration in the global rate of species extinction, which is already at least tens to hundreds of times higher than it has averaged over the past 10 million years. And it's not just over there in the Amazon basin or Borneo. While we cut down our forests centuries ago, biodiversity in Ireland is still demonstrating worrying and ongoing declines. And there are 5 main drivers of biodiversity loss in Ireland. They include, first of all, intensive agricultural and forestry practices. Second of all, overfishing, invasive species, changes in land use, over-exploitation of resources such as peatland. And my department reports every 6 years to the EU on the status of habitats and species protected by the EU Habitats Directive. And we have recently submitted the draft report for the past 6 years, and it shows that Irish habitats remain under enormous pressure, in particular our peatlands, our grasslands and some of the marine habitats. And I'm also concerned about the decline of certain species. Certain birds, for example, like the curlew, that used to breed in thousands across the bogs and wet grasslands of Ireland, but is now reduced to perhaps 150 pairs only. And I've also seen the reports that insects are declining on a massive scale across Europe. Insects are the most abundant terrestrial organisms on the planet and are paramount importance to the ecosystem services that sustain life on Earth, services like pollination, natural pest control, nutrient recycling and decomposition services. And of course, insects are also the main food for many fish, birds and mammals. And the occurrence and spread of invasive and non-native species in Ireland is also increasing for all environments. And all of this makes for very sobering and worrying reading. So to arrest or to stop this decline, though, we will need to significantly increase our efforts at all levels of society. And this is all the more pressing in the face of climate change. A healthy, resilient environment is necessary to help us mitigate and to adapt to its effects. There are, however, many positives, and the national efforts that this government has led to conserve biodiversity are now bearing fruit. This government is responding to the biodiversity emergency and the drivers of its loss, and it is making progress. My department is working hard and has achieved real results on a number of fronts, with the National Parks and Wildlife Service leading this work. First of all, we have committed in Project Ireland 2040 and are investing 60 million to protect Ireland's natural heritage and biodiversity. And we are now on our 3rd National Biodiversity Action Plan. This speaks to the long-running commitment that this government attaches to this issue. The current plan, as we know, runs from 2017 to 2021 and is the key national overarching policy for our work. It sets out actions that a range of government, civil and private sectors will undertake to achieve Ireland's vision for biodiversity, which is that biodiversity and ecosystems in Ireland are conserved and restored, delivering benefits essential for all sectors of society, and that Ireland contributes to efforts to halt the loss of biodiversity and the degradation of ecosystems in the EU and globally. So my department has also initiated a round of consultations with all relevant government departments, agencies and state-owned companies, as well as farmers, landowners, other sectors and NGOs, which is to set out our priorities for action during 2021 to 2027. We will be focusing on the habitats and species protected under EU directives and in the special areas of conservation and the special protection areas designated under those directives. My department is also engaged in a very wide public consultation process on Heritage 2030, the strategy for all strands of heritage in the coming 10 years. And we've also, Las Ceann Comhairle, undertaken a comprehensive range of meaningful and productive actions in recent years. These actions are resulting in real progress to protect and restore our country's biodiversity. For example, approximately 17% of the terrestrial area of Ireland now lies within the protected area network, and we have accelerated the designation process. We have also invested a significant $50 million since 2011 on a major restoration effort on our raised bogs. Also, the National Parks and Wildlife Service's Farm Plan scheme has already contributed to the conservation of protected species on agricultural land, for example, for cough, corn crake, hen harrier, breeding wintering geese and waders, and the natterjack toad. We established the National Curlew Task Force and a National Parks and Wildlife Service Curlew Conservation Programme, and we're also again recruiting specialist ecology staff and rangers for our parks and reserves. The EU LIFE programme has been a major source of support that Ireland has accessed for the conservation, management and restoration of habitats. And these habitats in turn support threatened and protected species. There are too many such projects to list them all here, but I will mention a few. Kerry Life, for example, is conserving the critically endangered freshwater pearl mussel through catchment scale measures. Arran Life, which has just concluded, works closely with the farming community of the Aran Islands to improve the conservation status of over 1,000 hectares of farmland comprising limestone pavement, orchard-rich grasslands and mash air. The Raptor Life project is working to connect and restore habitats for the hen harrier, the merlin, Atlantic salmon and brook lamprey. The great benefit of these live projects are that they provide some space in which to develop and strengthen working relationships with the key stakeholders, the farmers, the local communities, as well as academic or research institutions and other governmental bodies. And we are currently developing our biodiversity sectoral climate change adaptation plan, which places biodiversity at the heart of climate change solutions. And I'm proud to say that my department recently held Ireland's first, or inaugural, National Biodiversity Conference in February of this year. It is a signifier of our leadership in the protection of biodiversity and collaborative work with the relevant stakeholders. And in the lead up to the conference, I encouraged sectors to contribute towards the Seeds for Nature campaign in an effort to step up and accelerate progress towards achieving the objectives of the National Biodiversity Action Plan. Over 40 notable advancements that were achieved through this campaign included Coillte and Bord na Móna both made substantial commitments on restoring biodiversity in their land holdings, and this will achieve the rehabilitation of 20,000 hectares of cutaway bog and 1,000 hectares of raised bog by 2025, and the restoration of Hazelwood Forest, 130 hectare woodland in a special area of conservation on the banks of Lough Gill. And I'm doubling the funding provided to local authorities also, so that with local communities we can take local biodiversity action, including clearing invasive species. We are also establishing a business and biodiversity platform with the Department of Business and a range of Irish businesses, including Gas Networks Ireland, Airgrid, Keepack, Dawn Meats, Coillte and Bord na Móna. The Government is creating a legal onus, and I brought this to Cabinet recently, or a biodiversity duty on public bodies to have regard to policies, guidelines and objectives to promote the conservation of biodiversity and the National Biodiversity Action Plan. And we're also funding research into the impact of climate change on biodiversity. The Government is taking a coordinated approach and working across departments to protect our biodiversity. And my colleague, Minister Creed, the Minister for Agriculture, has achieved much work through his own department. For example, he's improved habitat management and water quality on lands of conservation value on 50,000 Irish farms through the GLOS scheme. He's restored, preserved and enhanced biodiversity through 23 European innovation partnerships. He's also restoring native woodland and converting conifers into native woodland through the Native Woodland Scheme. He's helping the recovery of commercial fish and shellfish stocks in the Celtic Sea, and he's helping sea life nursery grounds through a ban on inshore trawling by large boats. The Minister for Communications, Minister Bruton, is working through the Observe programme with my department to improve our knowledge of protected species, especially whales, dolphins, seabirds and sensitive habitats. And I will continue to work closely with Minister Bruton as we prepare to implement the Olaf Government Climate Action Plan. And many of the initiatives that we're going to take around climate change will be of clear long-term benefit to biodiversity, and we have to take great care to ensure that there are no unintended negative effects of nature in the process. However, even with all of this good work, we still are going to need to raise our game. We need to ensure that we don't erode our natural capital stock on which both our well-being and our economy rely. And some of the actions that need to be considered and resourced include management plans for our protected sites and their habitats and species, a conservation programme, particularly for grasslands, meadows and in the uplands, building on the success of the Burn and Arran programmes.
Excuse me, Minister, does the House agree that we give the Minister a few more minutes to...
I'll just be 1 minute, yeah.
Well, whatever you need. Okay.
Restructuring of non-productive, badly sited conifer plantations, especially on peatlands. The expansion of the area of native woodland to ensure functioning natural woodland across the landscape, and this will also contribute to our climate mitigation and adaptation targets, as will other conservation and restoration work on peatlands. There's going to be a rebooted programme. We hope, it would be good that if we could do this, a rebooted programme to remove invasive species, in particular rhododendron and laurel, to improve the quality of woodland. Also a national native wildflower initiative, particularly along transport corridors and in public spaces. And finally, a transformational change is required to ensure our consumption patterns are truly sustainable. So, Deputies, this Government acknowledges and understands the importance of Ireland's biodiversity and nature, and that is why we have invested significant resources in its protection. That is why we have taken and will continue to take coordinated action across departments to care for our habitats and species, and we have made meaningful progress, and this should be recognised, and I will continue to work hard with my colleagues across Government. Thank you.